Series 7 of the BBC's iconic cult film strand, Moviedrome, holds a special place in British broadcasting history. Broadcast on BBC2 during the summer of 1994 from May 15th to September 11th. It marked the final season, hosted by original presenter and director Alex Cox, before the show went on a mid-90s hiatus and was later revived with Mark Cousins. Cox's trademark style was fully refined, offering unvarnished, politically charged and unflinchingly honest commentary. Rather than acting as a standard TV hype man, he contextualized low-budget gems, foreign titles, and forgotten genre pieces with genuine critical analysis, and wasn't afraid to call out a film's flaws. Series 7 featured a typically eclectic mix of sci-fi, political thrillers, B-movies, and classic film noir. The series kicked off on May 15, 1994, pairing Robert Wire's methodical adaptation of Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Strain from 1971, and the gory stop-motion British B-monster flick Fiend Without a Face in 1958. Series 7 highlighted tense, dialogue-driven cinema, like Oliver Stone's Talk Radio from 1988, where Cox praised Bogosian's electrifying performance while dissecting the film's media themes. The final episode aired on September 11, 1994, closing out the Alex Cox era with Robert Aldrich's atomic film noir masterpiece, Kiss Me Deadly from 1955. Series 7 brought to an end 141 individual film introductions delivered by Alex Cox across 6 years, from 1988 to 1994. For late-night viewers in the UK prior to internet streaming, this final run encapsulated what made Moviedrome essential: curated access to transgressive, offbeat and politically subversive cinema that you simply couldn't find anywhere else on television. Thank you to everyone that made the show possible.
Good evening, and welcome to the new season of Moviedrome. Among the diverse delights we have for you this year are such cult gems as Kiss Me Deadly, The Harder They Come, and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, excursions into horror with Halloween,
Killed him.
You can't kill the boogeyman.
and The People Under the Stairs. We have a generous helping of film noir and a pair of demented biker movies. To begin the celebrations, a science fiction double bill, starting with The Andromeda Strain, a thriller based on a novel by Michael Crichton, the first such thriller, I think. It was made in 1970 in CinemaScope. This was the era of great experimentation in American film styles, and Andromeda Strain reflects this overtly in its use of split-screen sequences, as per The Boston Strangler and The Thomas Crown Affair. Tonight you'll see Andromeda Strain in its original CinemaScope form.
I was afraid of that. The birds will eat the infected flesh and then fly off and spread the disease.
If it is a disease.
The three Michael Crichton films that I'm familiar with are Westworld, Jurassic Park, and this one. And they all seem to have the same basic theme. In each film, man creates a high-tech electronic and mechanical paradise which invariably goes haywire and turns on its customers and creators. The Frankenstein story applied to theme parks and government installations. In the Andromeda Strain, an American satellite returns to Earth with a deadly organism from outer space, a life form which kills almost all humans on contact. While the scientists urge nuclear destruction of the affected area and politicians weigh up the likely consequences of incinerating select portions of the USA, a team of ace biologists and surgeons struggle to isolate the alien bacteria and find a cure.
Whatever killed them at Piedmont is still there and still as potent as ever.
If potent's the word. Let's try a rhesus. So, okay. Isolate and identify.
Right.
What's really interesting about this movie is its matter-of-factness. There are no movie stars, no love interest, no action until almost the very end. There's no music for the first hour of the film. The dialogue is often mundane and trivial, like the dialogue in that science fiction masterpiece, 2001, which is just as it should be, since the events in question, encounters with alien life, the possible annihilation of the human species, are so momentous. Ratcheted up just a notch, these could be Kubrick scientists with their animal experiments, their top secret government assignments, and their obsessive cleanliness.
We face quite a problem. How to disinfect the human body, one of the dirtiest things in the known universe.
That is without killing the human being at the same time.
It gets tougher as we go, I'm afraid.
Hard on the taxpayers, isn't it, the way we burn up uniforms?
They're paper.
Perhaps not surprisingly, special photographic effects are by Douglas Trumbull, who did the special effects on 2001 and later directed his own science fiction film, Silent Running. For my money, this is the best of these Crichton science fiction thrillers. There's a nice layer of irony, not quite of Kubrickian proportions, but much more than would be acceptable in a mainstream Hollywood film today. The Andromeda Strain was more than competently directed by Robert Wise, who is very good with individual scenes, but lets the movie as a whole run on too long. Wise was the editor of Citizen Kane and The Magnificent Ambersons, and the director of many studio epics, including Sound of Music and Star Trek, and weirder small-scale films like Curse of the Cat People and Day the Earth Stood Still. The Andromeda Strain is unique in one particular way. It manages to pull off a third act of running, jumping, hiding, chasing, shooting laser gun scenes which are actually interesting. Now, this is very rare. Normally, modern science fiction films follow the pattern of They Live, which after a tremendous opening degenerates into endless shots of people running and chasing down corridors, firing off laser guns, like an old episode of Doctor Who without the Daleks. The Andromeda Strain actually manages to have such a finale and to make it exciting, as one of the scientists crawls around a nuclear bomb while being blasted by robot-directed laser beams and sprayed with poison gas. It's a splendid finale. How, by the way, do you know in a movie whether the plane is going to explode or not? The answer is contained tonight in the form of product placement. Product placement is a form of baksheesh whereby the film's producers or the studio agree to have the actors use a certain brand of deodorant or drink a certain type of canned beverage or fly a certain carrier's planes. In return for the free advertising, the film receives free beer or plane tickets, or a certain brand of sweetener is added to somebody's Swiss bank account. Hence, if tonight the hero is traveling aboard a certain actual existing airline, relax. No airline is going to lend its logo to a movie if the plane then gets blown up, any more than a whiskey company is going to give free bottles to a production in which the hero dies of drink. So, from now on, if you see Warren Beatty getting aboard a plane bearing an obviously fake airline logo such as American Transair, be on your guard. At very least, there's going to be a mid-air collision and Warren is going to have to wrestle the old Airbus in for an emergency landing on the M6. Next, a variation on the Andromeda Strain theme, Fiend Without a Face. Alarmed by a series of mysterious deaths, an isolated Canadian community blames an American military atomic power experimental station situated nearby. Though set in Canada, Fiend Without a Face was shot right here in Great Britain by the Producers Associates in 1957. It was directed by Arthur Crabtree, who also made the infamous band movie Horrors of the Black Museum, and the script was by Amelia Reynolds Long. Presumably, it was set in North America in order to more effectively compete with the wave of American science fiction films of similar ilk. This was the era of the great Jack Arnold movies like Incredible Shrinking Man, Day the Earth Stood Still, War of the Worlds, This Island Earth, and Them. In other words, pretty stiff competition. And how does our homegrown sci-fi hold up in comparison? Well, although there's some good stock footage of aircraft a la Dr. Strangelove, this doesn't really look like Canada to me. Or if it is, it's a part of Canada that's filled with surreal little English bungalows. The actors are rather like the second and third row of troops in Dad's Army, and the only concession they make to being Americans is saying laboratory instead of laboratory. None of this applies to the extremely sexy Kim Parker in the role of Barbara Griselle, by the way. One place, though, where I think Fiend Without a Face does compete very favorably with its American contemporaries is in The Monsters, when they finally appear. It takes a while for this to happen, because they are, like the killer plague in Andromeda Strain, invisible. In fact, when I first saw the footprint or tail print of the invisible fiends, I thought, oh no, this isn't going to be any good at all. They did this much better in Forbidden Planet. But no, I was deceived, because when the Fiend Without a Face actually ceases to be invisible, the result is absolutely horrible. And there isn't just one of them. There's hundreds of them. Well, dozens anyway. Don't miss them. Nor should you fail to observe the prominently placed Principles of Thought Control by Professor Waldgrove, or was it Waldgate? And, if my conspiratorial studies don't deceive me, wasn't there actually an American mind control experiment in Canada in the 50s, pumping mental patients full of drugs and giving them electric shocks to see if they could be made to act against their will, run by a sinister psychiatrist called Dr. Gottlieb? Better refer to my back copies of Lobster. Without further delay, then, Fiend Without a Face. Radio is a film by Oliver Stone, based on the true story of Alan Berg, an American radio phone-in host who was murdered by neo-Nazis in 1984. As such, it's the perfect Stone vehicle, featuring a tortured, maligned, but righteous anti-hero fighting fascism while trying to come to terms with his own male chauvinism and find a girlfriend.
Maybe some of the courage that small boy had as he faced unspeakable evil can enter me as I face the trials in my own life. As I face the cowardly and the narrow-minded, the bitter, bigoted people who hide behind anonymous phone calls full of hatred and poisonous bile. The gutless, spineless people like you, Chet, who make me puke.
Keep talking, Jew boy. Life is short.
The source material was, as you might expect, a stage play by Eric Bogosian, who also plays the lead role. Ollie is, of course, a great director and a great American. Well, goddammit, he went to Vietnam instead of smoking dope at Oxford, or worse, protesting against the war. He's one of the few American directors living, the other two who spring to mind being Spielberg and Woody Allen, who get to write their own ticket and do whatever the heck they want. His best films for me are Salvador and JFK. Talk Radio is a pretty interesting film. Stone is obsessed by pressing social issues: corruption on Wall Street, US imperialism, the rise of neo-fascist groups, and above all the notion that the United States lost its innocence in the 1960s as a result of Kennedy's assassination and the Vietnam War. This is, of course, what the Americans call bullshit, and John Milius wouldn't buy it for a second. But it's a popular notion among wet liberals who like to view political assassination and out-of-control militarism as the exception rather than the rule. It's the same sort of wishy-washy revisionism we get from David Putnam, who tells us in The Killing Fields that the Americans bombed Cambodia by mistake and how they won the war for us in Memphis Belle. It's all ludicrous, but it's the ludicrosity of the limousine liberal, and there are a lot of those in Hollywood. And, vicious betraying gangsters that these liberal studio bosses are, they solve their charred consciences by funding liberal social issue films like this one.
Well, I'm black.
Oh, good for you. What do you want, a medal?
Well, No, I don't. No, I don't. Now, don't play with me like them other people. Yeah, I want you to know that I enjoy listening to your show. And I want to say, I like you Jews.
Well, I like you blacks. I think everyone should own one.
Talk Radio is beautifully photographed by Robert Bob Richardson. The script, by Bogosian and Stone, is intermittently pretty good, particularly in its creation of a truly typical American heavy metal stoner, Kent, brilliantly portrayed by Michael Wincott. Kent is the one wonderful creation of the film, a true freak on a par with the Salvadorian death squad leader in Salvador or the Bruegelian conspirators in JFK. You really feel the director's sense of horror that creatures such as Kent exist, which they do in profusion.
You're sitting in a radio station, Kent. You're sitting in front of a live mic. When you speak, thousands of people hear your voice. It penetrates their minds.
Okay, no, listen, I want to send that one out to Diamond Dave and Billy the bass player and all the babes at the Valley View Mall.
I actually wish Stone would make a film about the grunge phenomenon starring Marky Mark, because he's at his best when he depicts characters he absolutely hates. The problem is, he's into this Manichaean vision of the world, in which the D'Aubissons and the Kents and the neo-Nazis are balanced by good characters, such as Jim Garrison or Charlie Sheen. The closest he comes to a realistic protagonist, I suspect, is the troubled, anguished, conscience-stricken saint we're about to see tonight. Watch out for Rocket's Red Glare, one of the last people to see Sid and Nancy Vicious extant in a small role at the very end. Mr. Red Glare also played the liquor store attendant in Mystery Train. And witness also the prophetic nature of talk radio. Since it was made, the United States has seen the rise to celebrityhood of two truly horrific talk radio personalities, Rush Limbaugh and Howard Stern. Mr. Stern, by the way, bears a close resemblance to Mr. Bogosian in the sepia-tinted flashbacks of talk radio. Could they, by any chance...
Tonight's cult film from the Moviedrome stable is Carnal Knowledge, Strong Acting, Strong Language. Alex Cox provides the essential guide.
Tonight, a classic film about angst-ridden, middle-class, middle-aged Americans, Carnal Knowledge. Carnal Knowledge was directed by Mike Nichols in 1971. Nichols is the doyen of directors of films about angst-ridden, middle-class Americans. He made The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman, as well as Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Catch-22. Carnal Knowledge is notable in that it depicts these angst-ridden, middle-class characters aging, as Jack Nicholson and Art Garfunkel moved from being college students in the 1940s to burned-out 70s businessmen. The aging process is actually very well done, a combination of quite subtle makeup and hair work and an increasingly visible tiredness on the actors' parts. It's considerably more effective than the Nosferatu pancake makeup applied to Gary Oldman in Dracula. That sort of stuff inevitably looks fake and makes the actor under it look silly. Here, the makeup helps the acting. It doesn't dominate it.
Ever read Gentleman's Agreement by Laura Z. Hobson? Ever read The Bell for Adano by John Hersey? I'm going to read everything from now on. I read more than you do, so who's the one who's sensitive? You or me? Come on. Who's sensitive?
Carnal Knowledge is a pretty good cynical film, which seems to be striving to be something else, an epic statement of some kind. It never quite manages that, and the story feels like it's being pulled in more than one direction simultaneously. The script was by noted cartoonist Jules Feiffer, The guy who does those once-a-week, 6-panel comics about angst-ridden, middle-aged Americans in the Sunday papers. Mike Nichols is a good, naturalistic director who occasionally veers off into the somewhat weird, as in the last scene with Nicholson. Nichols apparently owns a variety of literary properties, and in addition to directing, makes money brokering them. Apparently he owned the rights to Howard's End, and is currently looking to make or sell Cormac McCarthy's Western novel, All the Pretty Horses. The cast are all impressive. Nicholson is very good. This was the period of his greatest performances. 5 Easy Pieces and The Last Detail were also made around this time. Garfunkel gives perhaps his best screen work, and Anne Margaret, Candice Bergen, Rita Moreno, and Carol Kane are all excellent.
You're watching BBC Two. Now, the long arm of the law catches up with Alex Cox, who presents his case from the Moviedrome.
Tonight on Moviedrome, A Long Arm of the Law double bill. 2 films about hard-boiled cops escorting crooks who mustn't be allowed to get away. Coogan's Bluff and The Narrow Margin. Coogan's Bluff is the prototypical Dirty Harry movie, made 3 years earlier than Dirty Harry by the same director, Don Siegel, the same musical composer, Lalo Schifrin, and of course the same actor, Clint Eastwood.
That's a prisoner out there, not an animal to be tethered to a rail.
Look, my shirt's in there on the bed.
So what?
There's a badge on it, it comes right off.
You want to play it lonesome boy, fine. You'll get a gutful. Every lousy one-man job that comes along. Got one waiting for you right now.
That's all.
Tonight, Eastwood plays a deputy sheriff from Arizona who is sent to New York to escort a psychopathic killer back to his home state. Much amusement is occasioned by New York-Arizona dissimilarities and the way everyone Eastwood meets assumes he is from Texas. Any Arizonan would be and is horrified at the thought of being mistaken for a Texan. Texans are of a large and somewhat noisy disposition. Arizonans are a great deal quieter and formal as opposed to rude.
You from Texas?
Arizona.
Everybody wear them clothes in Arizona?
No, lifeguards wear swim trunks. Nurses wear white dresses. What do they wear here?
Both states were once part of the Spanish Empire known as Mexico. Texas broke away from Mexico in 1836 and was a separate nation for several years, becoming part of the United States in 1845. Arizona, north of the Gila River, became part of the United States during the Mexican War of 1848. The southern part was bought by the U.S. under the Gadsden Purchase of 1854. Texas is the home of the great Texan oil barons, the Hunts and the Murchisons. Arizona is the home of the great saguaro cactus, found only in the south of that state and in northern Sonora, Mexico. Arizona being clearly better than Texas, it's good to see Eastwood sticking up for the land of the saguaro. It is his geographic basis that makes Eastwood so appealing in Coogan's Bluff. When he's more urban, as he is in the San Francisco-based Dirty Harry series, he's less charming, more a maniacal gun freak.
Look, friends, we want to be alone.
Go away, Charlie.
Yeah, while your legs still work.
All right, now. Now, I don't like violence, Mr. Wonderful, whatever your name is. You better drop that blade, or you won't believe what happens next, even while it's happening.
Inevitably, in Coogan's Bluff, Clint gets beaten up. This appears to have been in his contract since he made A Fistful of Dollars, where everything that happened to him was borrowed from Kurosawa's Yojimbo. Toshiro Mifune played the samurai in Kurosawa's film. He went on to play more samurai, but also businessmen and gangsters and an assortment of tough guys. Clint's range has been less extensive, although he did essay the role of film director John Huston in his White Hunter, Black Heart. In tonight's film, he goes through more or less the same motions Richard Widmark did in Madigan, Don Siegel's previous film. You have to hand it to Siegel, turning out 3 films in quick succession, all of which have the same plot, but different central characters and titles. That's recycling.
This isn't the OK Corral around here. This is the city of New York. We've got a system. Not much, but we're fond of it. We don't like it when some two-for-a-nickel cowboy thinks he can bend it out of shape.
Are you charging me or what?
Tonight's bad guy is played by Don Stroud. He's almost as bad as Andy Robinson in Dirty Harry. Also noteworthy in the cast are Lee J. Cobb and Seymour Cassell. The script is not without its 60s infelicities, as when the embittered Eastwood tells his New York girlfriend, "The color of pity is red."
Tonight's cult Moviedrome film stars reggae singer Jimmy Cliff in a tale of frustrated ambition where violence becomes a way out. Life and language in the raw.
Tonight on Moviedrome, the ultimate music-related non-rockumentary cult classic, the Saturday late-night show par excellence, The Harder They Come, made in 1972 in Jamaica. The film, as you probably know, stars reggae genius Jimmy Cliff in the role of Ivan, an aspiring young Jamaican musician who plans to make it as a reggae star.
What do you want? Bring the records for the rally, son. I can sing to you now, sir. I'd like the chance to make a record.
Everybody want to make a record. You almost ready?
But I have a boss song, you know, sir. This one must sell.
What time is audition? Okay, let's go.
What time tomorrow, sir?
Tomorrow.
It features one of the most exciting musical tracks of any feature film, encapsulating with a selection of really great hits a musical moment, just as Dennis Hopper's Easy Rider and Colors soundtracks did, or the Pistols soundtrack for Julian Temple's Great Rock and Roll Swindle. The Harder They Come features music by Toots and the Maytals, Jimmy Cliff, Desmond Decker, and the Slickers. The songs include Many Rivers to Cross, Johnny Too Bad, You Can Get It If You Really Want, and of course the title track, The Harder They Come. As a soundtrack, it ranks with American Graffiti, The Big Chill, The Graduate, and Midnight Cowboy. Not only does The Harder They Come feature a great soundtrack, it also manages to be a great film as well. The director, Perry Hensel, was a graduate of the BBC. This was his first feature. The Harder They Come is sort of the career of a social bandit, like Bonnie and Clyde or Salvatore Giuliano. At the same time, and this is both Cliff's and Hensel's brilliance, there are no false notes, no dubious mythologizing. When Ivan is taken to jail, he is scared. He's violent and misogynistic. He has a very romantic notion of himself as a Robin Hood character. At one point, Moviedrome regulars will note he goes to see Sergio Corbucci's spaghetti western Django at the Rialto Cinema in Kingston. The film impresses him so much that he actually identifies with Django, aka Franco Nero, in the final showdown.
One who can draw, just come out. You don't shut your mouth. You think Hero can dare to the last reel?
Kids, do not attempt these feats in your own home. Do not become a ganja-dealing gangster or a rock and roll musician. Do not drag a Gatling gun around in a coffin, or if you must, avoid gun-toting maniacs and fast-flowing rivers of mud. Remain glued to your television, unbemused by the distinction between reality and unreality, as Moviedrome presents the first Jamaican feature film, the first original classic of cult reggae cinema, The Harder They Come.
Portrayal of life in this divided country and contains strong language and disturbing scenes.
Salvador was directed in 1986 by Oliver Stone. Although it always features in his filmography as Stone's first film as a director, it was actually his third or even fourth. For some reason, his early triumphs are not referred to by critics earnestly intent on evaluating the great man's work. Okay, I'm being a bit facetious. The truth is, the worth of Stone's other films apart, Salvador is a really great film. I first saw it at the film market at the Cannes Film Festival. It was the film's first international screening, and there were 2 other people in the audience. This was, of course, before the success of Platoon, also made by the Stone, John Daly, Derek Gibson team. For my money, Platoon is complete rubbish, a nasty bit of propaganda which suggests that if the poor, poor American GIs had only had better officers, they would have won the Vietnam War. By Salvador, however, I was blown away. I was so impressed by and involved in the film that I couldn't remember where I was. So strong was the film and so authentic that it was completely overpowering, even in a tiny screening room at 3 in the afternoon.
No. No. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Sí, señor. Whatever you do, Doc. Whatever you do, okay? Don't get on the ground.
Jesus Christ, man, this is fucking scary.
Salvador is based on the experiences of American journalist Richard Boyle, who covered events in El Salvador in the early years of the Reagan regime in Washington. Boyle is a great character, wonderfully played by James Woods, a freakoid ambulance chaser whose partnership with the James Belushi character, Dr. Rock, seems more than a little based on the characters of Hunter Thompson and his American Samoan lawyer, Dr. Gonzo, in the celebrated counterculture narrative, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. In fact, by borrowing so heavily from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Stone has achieved the impossible, created a film with a journalist protagonist whom you actually like. Because it's par for the course for liberal films about foreign policy issues to have a reporter for their hero. Think of The Year of Living Dangerously, The Killing Fields, and Under Fire. All of the miserable propagandistic failures with bland, wishy-washy heroes who spend 2 weeks wherever the action is, then run back to New York to pick up their Pulitzer Prize. Under Fire was a particularly egregious example where the filmmakers went so far as to pretend that the Nicaraguan Revolution was actually won by American journalists. Interesting notion. From my experience, reporters who spend a lot of time in war zones are a lot more like James Woods or Hunter Thompson than like the saintly whiner hero of The Killing Fields. Face it, war, or as the Americans called the ongoing massacre in El Salvador, low-intensity conflict, is a dirty, nasty, pointless, and horrific business, and any reporter who makes a living out of covering wars is seriously disturbed, which Richard Boyle, as written by Stone and played by Woods, quite clearly is. Salvador is that extremely rare item, a well-made, thoroughly entertaining political film. It does a lot more than the real Boyle did, placing its protagonist at the scene of the murder of Archbishop Romero by a right-wing death squad, and having him on the spot immediately after the Salvadorian army murdered 4 American nuns. It also depicts the political conversion of the American ambassador, played very well by Michael Murphy, a conversion which actually occurred. Ultimately, of course, the film cops out. Following a battle between the army and the FMLN guerrillas who ride into town, rather improbably on horseback, there comes the obligatory scene where the rebels shoot some of their prisoners and Woods runs back and forth shouting, "You're just as bad as each other! You're just as bad as each other!" to both sides. Actually, the line looks like an afterthought, as if it had been dubbed in post-production over Woods' back. Why then does Stone, having depicted a grandiloquent, high-energy but essentially truthful series of events, undercut his own message at the end? In different circumstances, one might blame the studio or the executives, or they forced him to do it. But in this case, the production company is Hemdale, and whatever the vices of Messrs. Daly and Gibson, neither one was ever accused of being a minion of right-wing politicians or liberal aesthetics. I'm afraid it's a case of the director pulling his punches at the last minute, because he's afraid to depict a national liberation movement in too positive a light. In the same way, in his most recent film, Heaven and Earth, it's not the Americans, but the Viet Cong who rape the Vietnamese heroine. This small quibble aside, Salvador is an impressive piece of work. It was made mostly in Mexico by some of Mexico's best film craftspeople. It features some of the better Mexican actors, Salvador Sanchez, René Pereira, and Roberto Sosa, in supporting roles. The editing by Claire Simpson and Carlos Puente is outstanding, and the camera work by a duo of American cinematographers, Bob Richardson and Tom Richmond, is magnificent. Has anything changed in El Salvador since the film was made? Unfortunately, it seems not. In the run-up to the March elections, 40 FMLN candidates were killed by death squads, and the US military has resumed war games with the Salvadorian army. Meanwhile, the country slips further into a cycle of poverty and repression, the reason the Civil War began in the first place. People Under the Stairs was written and directed by Wes Craven, whose Serpent and the Rainbow we saw on Moviedrome a couple of years ago. It is, I'm pleased to say, a much better film. It's also the film's first screening on terrestrial television. It was generally viewed as a return to form by Craven, who had been highly regarded for his early horror film, The Hills Have Eyes. It's unusual for a Craven picture, or for any horror film, in having non-white protagonists. In this case, an impoverished black family fronted by a little kid called Fool.
I don't think we should go up there anymore.
People Under the Stairs is part of an emerging genre or subgenre of films such as Trespass, which take as their premise an ongoing war in the United States between blacks and whites. So it's pretty interesting stuff. A far cry from the innocent American tourists kidnapped by voodoo thugs in Serpent and the Rainbow.
It's just there have been an awful lot of robberies lately. Neighborhood's changing. Has us all a bit on edge.
I completely understand. It's better this little bother than a chance of danger, though, right?
Kim Newman, in the Monthly Film Bulletin, wrote that Craven's films tend to a penetrating and cynical vision of post-Vietnam/Watergate/Nixon America. Well, maybe. Newman also observed in his review of People Under the Stairs that Craven had perhaps taken his reviews too seriously and was laboring the socially relevant aspects as a result. Well, that's possible too. For me, I like the socially relevant aspects, since they make the film a little different from the generic norm.
Good appetite. Healthy Prince. Secure home.
It's certainly Craven's best-made film, slick and well-constructed. As with most post-60s horror films, it owes a big debt to George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which itself borrows from Polanski's Repulsion. The nightmare American Gothic house in which the weird events unfold is straight out of Carrie, and there are debts to Halloween as well. Perhaps the least appealing homage is the casting of two actors from the TV series Twin Peaks in the villainous roles. Everett McGill and Wendy Roby essentially spice up their partnership from the TV show, which is a trifle feeble, but was no doubt viewed as wise box office strategy.
The boys got into Alice.
Overall, The People Under the Stairs is a good mixture of genuine, effective horror, surprise reversals, and bizarre camperism. The goings-on don't make much sense, but they don't have to. They conform to the logic of a modern horror film, like Super Mario Brothers fulfills the expectations of a connoisseur of video games. Tonight on Moviedrome, the kind of film which should make everybody happy. A movie which was both a popular hit and a critical succès de scandale, Halloween. Halloween was directed in 1978 by John Carpenter. It's one of the earliest and most imitated of that overworked and seemingly endlessly popular genre, the serial killer, maniac, stalker on the loose in pursuit of hapless teenagers movie. The kind of film where you know beforehand exactly what's going to happen. Of course the teenagers are going to split up and explore the madhouse in total darkness in their underwear. What else would they do?
You're not supposed to go up there.
Yes, I am.
That's the spook house.
Just watch.
I must confess that when I saw Halloween in 1978, I found it ridiculous and utterly uninvolving. But I am stupid. The sort of spoilsport idiot who says, I wouldn't do that, or that doesn't make sense. In the same way I can't find any point of entry to Mrs. Doubtfire or the piano. They just seem ridiculous to me. Maybe I'd feel different if I hadn't grown up on Dead of Night and Easy Rider. Well, anyway, tonight's film features Donald Pleasance in the kind of role he always seems to play. His performance, like Halloween itself, received extravagant praise from some of the most eminent film critics in the UK on its release.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
It also features Jamie Lee Curtis in the role of the plucky and resilient heroine. Jamie Lee is, of course, the daughter of Janet Leigh, star of that even more celebrated maniac-at-large movie, Psycho. This is just one of Halloween's many conscious or self-conscious references to other movies.
Oh, God, help me, please! Hello? Hello? Oh! Hello, help me! Man, please help me! Please! Can't you hear me? Oh, God! Oh!
Carpenter even goes so far as to use video extracts from earlier films like Forbidden Planet and The Thing, a movie he was to remake a few years later. Much has been made of the persistent use of Steadicam in Halloween and of the camera as killer's point of view, which here in Moviedrome you will experience in the full majesty of its original cinemascope form. This technique has been done to death ever since, although devotees of the genre would say never to such ambiguous good effect. For this reviewer, John Carpenter's best film is still his first, the seriously funny space saga Dark Star, made as a student film at USC and co-written by Dan O'Bannion. He also deserves credit for the extraordinary first half of They Live, his 1988 alien takeover movie. One fact for true Carpenter buffs: the villain of tonight's piece is called Michael Myers, reputedly the director's odd way of saying thanks to the chief exec of Miracle Films. If it's a good film, it's a miracle. Distributors in Britain of Assault on Precinct 13. But for now, trick or treat, here it is, Halloween.
Something truly horrible for you.
The Baby was directed in 1972 by Ted Post. Ted Post is probably not a name that most people conjure with, yet for me he was one of the best American directors for hire, having made a very passable spaghetti western imitation with Clint Eastwood, Hang 'em High, and perhaps also the best of the Dirty Harry films, certainly the best of the Dirty Harry sequels, Magnum Force. Most film and TV directors are directors for hire, in fact, in the sense that they don't initiate their own projects, but direct whatever comes along. A good American example would be Gordon Douglas, who did fine work on movies as diverse as Vaquero and Them. On our side of the Atlantic, Mike Hodges springs to mind. He directed Get Carter, Flash Gordon, and Morons from Outer Space. Some directors start out for hire and become auteurs, Don Siegel being the obvious example. Others start out auteurs and do the reverse. William Friedkin, for instance, who, after making Sorcerer, one of the most expensive personal projects of all time, was reduced to doing Chevy Chase vehicles and rip-offs of his own The Exorcist, like The Guardian. Even highly respected American directors hire themselves out on worthless projects from time to time. Coppola on Peggy Sue Got Married, Scorsese on The Color of Money, in the hope of getting bucks for personal projects down the line. Tonight, Ted Post takes us on a weird 60s excursion which resembles a cross between Play Misty for Me and The Beguiled. Like The Beguiled or Aldrich's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, The Baby is all about women, obsessive, oppressive harridans, or predatory innocents who look and sound a lot like characters from an R. Crumb cartoon or from a Corman Edgar Allan Poe movie. The heroine appears to live in the House of Usher, too.
Oh, why does that babysitter always have to leave this damn TV on?
Mama, eat too many egg rolls.
You're always making a little piglet out of yourself.
Where is she?
Probably upstairs with baby. What the hell do you think you're doing?
We were just fooling around. Nothing really happened, honest.
Nothing happened.
The dialogue, by Abraham Polsky, who also co-produced the film with another Polsky, Milton, is sensational. Though made in '72, The Baby is pure hippiana. Do you like physical exercise? I'm a Scorpio. We're very cautious. Which occasionally rises to the sublimely manic heights of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. When you're a winner, Alba, the possibility of losing doesn't exist. Ruth Roman is excellent as Mrs. Wordsworth, a mad combo of Joan Collins, Elizabeth Taylor, and Joan Crawford. And Anna Jetcoma is a more than able foil.
I didn't mean any harm, Mrs. Wadsworth. I just want to help Baby reach his full potential.
Are you sure that's all you want, Mrs. Gentry?
What more could there be?
The Baby does descend into the familiar girls creeping through the darkened corridors of the old Dark House mode in the last reel, but it redeems itself completely in its final minutes with the most outstandingly sick ending of any film yet shown on Moviedrome.
You man, Dudley.
Carney was directed in 1980 by Robert Caylor. We will say no more about him, since he directs in a TV movie style which is overlit and thoroughly predictable. Let's talk instead about the second lead actor, co-author and producer of the film, Robbie Robertson. Robbie Robertson was the founder and songwriter of one of the seminal American bands of the 60s and 70s, The Band. I know that out there are adherents of all sorts of other 60s groups, that out there are Grateful Dead heads in abundance, Fairport Convention enthusiasts, Beatles and Stones devotees, Jimi Hendrix experience fans, even a few people who still like the appallingly overrated LA band The Doors with their fat fantasist lead singer Jim Garrison, or was it Morrissey? But for the money of this punter, the band that stands out from that now murky era was The Band. The Band were a bunch of Canadians who somehow teamed up with one Robert Dylan and became his backing group. They can be heard together on a variety of Dylan records. More interesting, though, were the albums they produced on their own. Music from the Big Pink, Cahoots, Stage Fright, etc. Those old enough will surely remember the band's The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, a rather unpolitically correct paean to the Confederacy, which was covered by Joan Baez. The band specialized in rustic pastoral Americana, spiced up with a considerable degree of cynicism, irony, and pessimism. Somewhat like Peckinpah, they celebrated a golden age of mining camps and rural Americana which was already being ground down by the wheels of technology and the corporate future. The Band was celebrated by Martin Scorsese in his long rockumentary, The Last Waltz. Inevitably, with celebrity came dissolution. Levon Helm, the band's singer, left to become a movie actor. He appears in Coal Miner's Daughter and is a pretty good actor, though of late considerably underused. Richard Manuel, maddest of the band members, killed himself, and the gigantic Garth Hudson, a proper musician, appears to have returned to serious pursuits. You always felt a competitive tension between Helm and Robertson. Helm was clearly the better singer and seemed the soul of the band, but Robertson wrote the words and was more handsome, more energetic. If Helm left to become an actor, an acting career for Robertson could not be far behind. Carney was the result. It's so clearly Robertson's project. It contains so many of the themes he wrote about in his songs. A scarecrow and a yellow moon, and pretty soon a carnival on the edge of town. The characters in Carney, Gary Busey, Jodie Foster, Elisha Cook, Robertson himself, all sound and act like the cast of a band song like The Wait or The River Hymn. The film isn't completely successful. The action is poorly staged, and Cook in particular is sentimentally overused.
I've been with it 50 years. And it's time I packed it in. I'm gonna get myself a little place down in Gibtown. And I hope you'll come visit me in Carneyland. I'm gonna miss each and every one of you. Now, is that settled? What do you say we get shit-faced?
And what is the point to a scene where Jodie Foster says to Robbie, "Do you want coffee?" And Robbie says, "Yes, black." And we cut to another location where Jodie says, "2 black coffees," and then we cut away to something else. This is the defining moment of inconsequentiality in a film which doesn't know where it's going, much less how to get there. Yet there are good things too. The cast are great. Foster is incredibly sexy, and the supporting cast contains some genuine vertically and horizontally challenged persons sympathetically portrayed. At times, Robertson or Thomas Baum's dialogue really stands out, as when he's trying to persuade Busey to join him in a ménage à quatre and explains, "I don't want to get double-doored in the double duty."
You gotta help him out with this situation. This is one of those things, you know what I mean?
I tell you what, this is gonna be a gift from me to you, okay? Because I just can't leave her out here. That's all. You understand? Okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's also to Robertson's great credit that he didn't think he could do everything himself. Although he contributed to the soundtrack, credit for the musical score goes to Alex North, one of the great Hollywood composers, who received 15 Oscar nominations and whose long list of credits includes Viva Zapata, Streetcar Named Desire, Spartacus, Cleopatra, Cheyenne Autumn, Prizzi's Honor, and Wise Blood. Also to its credit, the film does pick up towards the end, starting to resemble the carnival sideshows around which it has revolved. you're unlikely to make it all the way through without being deceived at some point as to what is going on. And that, more than anything, means that the film succeeds. Tonight on Moviedrome, Naked Under Leather, or rather, Girl on a Motorcycle, as Jack Cardiff's film became more chastely known. It forms the first half of our mad motorcycling double bill, the second feature of which will be Psychomania. Girl on a Motorcycle is an Anglo-French co-production made in 1968. It stars Marianne Faithfull, and, as you might expect, goes in for lashings of the old solarized images and weird color and bizarre superimpositions, faithfully recreating the hallucinogenic experience in order to prolong the travelogues and render the bunk-ups more artistic. It's a nutty but highly entertaining film. Jack Cardiff was a noted cameraman. He shot Black Narcissus, The Red Shoes, African Queen, and Rambo 2, along with many other pictures. His directorial work includes Sons and Lovers and Death on the Nile. He certainly provides some exhilarating motorcycle sequences, as our heroine, or her stunt double, rides an enormous Harley-Davidson electric glide across the Franco-German border to see her intellectual biker boyfriend, played by Alain Delon. Enthusiasts will also be pleased to know that in a flashback, Alain teaches Marianne to ride aboard his Norton.
Now remember, treat machinery as if it were human, and it responds. It's only people who allow themselves to be treated as machines, right? Let the clutch in gently. No more. Now, give the engine a little throttle.
Girl on a Motorcycle is so mad, so over the top, that it's hard to rationally describe or criticize. There are moments of sublime madness, as where Cardiff cuts from an exciting bike-in exterior to an overhead shot of a bowl of bubbling fondue. It's so insane, there has to be a real intelligence behind it.
I have no identity. Lost forever in you, Daniel. A randy bitch permanently on heat. That's what you want, isn't it? You don't care, do you? You're a sadist, my darling, a magnificent sadist. You're a bastard! Bastard!
Not so excellent is the incessant voiceover, with the unfortunate Miss Faithfull forced to spout hippie rhetoric such as, "Why don't the dead rebel?" All the dialogue is of this ilk, and so Delon is forced to intone, "A motorbike is closer to you than any human being." You can appreciate her predicament. What would you do if you were in love with Alain Delon, and he'd given you a motorbike, and you were married to a guy called Roger Mutton? Marianne's obsession provides some splendid wacky visuals, as even the roadside billboards start to display Alain's visage as she streaks past.
Champagne, my darling Dionysus! And water for Raymond. Poor old Raymond.
One quibble, though, although it's unlikely to spoil the enjoyment of the general viewer, but why doesn't Marianne's bike lean over when she goes round corners? It does on the wide shots, where presumably she's being doubled, but on all the close and medium shots of her riding, she and the bike remain bolt upright at all times, the way Sid Vicious did on his Triumph in The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, almost as if they weren't really riding the motorcycle at all, but merely sitting on it on a platform, or holding a pair of handlebars in the back of a pickup truck. Surely not. 1972. There seems to be a French connection here as well, as the script is by one Arnaud Dussault. Unless, of course, Arnaud Dussault is actually a pseudonym. Wasn't David Hare writing biker movies around this time in order to pay his way through socialist realism polytechnic? I think we should be told. The film stars George Sanders and Beryl Reid, though both appear far too infrequently, in my opinion. The bulk of screen time is devoted not to George and Beryl, but to a biker gang appropriately named The Living Dead. Appropriately, since they are led by a deceased biker who has been buried astride his cycle.
Tom! And another thing. You can only die once. After that, nothing and nobody can harm you.
Oh, man, what are you waiting for?
All of which leads to some fine out-of-the-grave stuff, none of it quite in the league of the fantastic nightmare sequences of Hammer's Plague of the Zombies. Psychomania, it is not clear why the film is named this, was directed by one Don Sharp, an Australian director who also made Witchcraft and The Face of Fu Manchu for Hammer. Face of Fu Manchu, with Christopher Lee as the demonic doctor, was, in my opinion, a far better, more inspired film. One can only hope that the tide of political correctness has not prevented Lee and Boris Karloff's portrayals of the fiendish Fu Manchu being washed ashore occasionally on our late-night screens. But let there be no mistake. Though it is nowhere near as good as Girl on a Motorcycle, Psychomania is a worthwhile freakoid film with some fine characterizations. Gymkhana girls meet brutish bikers, and some outstanding lines of dialogue. To wit, anyone taking a Maximus Leopardus from a graveyard is either foolhardy or ignorant. It's a good mix of late 60s and early 70s Hammer and Amicus horror films and the American biker flicks of the same era.
What the blazes? What's going on in there? Just road. I want to have a talk with you two. Where did you get these machines?
Tom?
Well, have you made up your mind yet?
Yes. I'm coming with you.
If only Harold Pinter had worked harder on the script, I say all would have been well. True fans of this movie will want to order copies of the soundtrack with its theme song, Ridin' Free, sung by Harvey Andrews.
He really got it on. He rode that sweet machine just like a bomb.
Everyone else will not. Elements of the road movie, the counterculture movie, the motorhome movie, and Night of the Living Dead.
What the hell are they doing?
I don't know. They sure got a big one going. It's not a barbecue.
Warren Oates and Peter Fonda played Frank and Roger, two good old Texas boys who own a bike shop in San Antonio and head out in a luxurious recreational vehicle with their wives for a skiing holiday in Colorado. Their destination is Aspen, which sums up one of the pleasing contradictions of the film. Aspen is a yuppie paradise, the last place a red-blooded redneck peckerwood would dream of heading for, but a popular watering hole for young, rich Hollywood types like Peter Fonda. Fonda and Oates stick out like sore thumbs in the film, forever putting on oversized shades, Oates wears his indoors, and parading around in designer down jackets. And the nightmarish staring fits this inspires in almost everyone they meet are some of the paranoid high points of the film. To see Oates and Fonda trying to play rednecks is doubly interesting, since they were both aboard their hippie Harleys only 6 years earlier in Easy Rider. Oates actually can play a redneck and does so brilliantly in The Wild Bunch, Cockfighter, and Major Dundee. But Fonda is Hollywood aristocracy through and through, a breed at least as weird as E.T. And both of them were at this time representatives of the drug-consuming anti-war, anti-Nixon counterculture, high on loco weed and Russian vodka, not the martini-drinking members of the Rotary Club we see here. What's even weirder is that Fonda's character, the improbably named Roger, is apparently some kind of anti-firearm pacifist. Surely some joke, since Fonda was at the time a renowned gun freak whose vast collection of people-killing devices was reputed to rival the armories of Elvis Presley and the Duke John Wayne. All of which adds to the piquancy of this bizarre and quite frightening film. So tonight, don't be surprised that pacifist Pete, alias Roger, turns out to be no slouch with a pump-action shotgun. 1975 was a boom year in sales of motorhomes and recreational vehicles, coinciding, perhaps not coincidentally, with the wave of features about truckers, RVs, CB radios, and other consumer durables of the open road. Oates' presentation of the high-tech knickknacks of his new Del Rio Roadmeister is hilarious, while at the same time preparing us for the horrific events which are to occur therein. Also concurrent with these displays of consumerism was the 70s cinematic vogue for scenes of spectacular vehicle destruction. Ever since Steve McQueen's exciting car chase in the Peter Yates film Bullet, scenes in which motor vehicles raced, rammed each other, turned over, and burst into flames had become de rigueur in the majority of English-speaking films. If Howard's End had been made in 1975, it would have had a car chase in it. The greatest exponent of the exciting car chase subgenre of 70s cinema was William Friedkin, who created the state-of-the-art car chase in The French Connection and then outdid that in To Live and Die in L.A. Mike and Roger really are an awful pair with their Formica-walled motorcycle shop and their interchangeable wives and their giant gas-guzzling recreational juggernaut and their nasty little whiny, motored, environmentally unfriendly off-road bikes. They're almost the worst type of human beings, so naturally we can't help being attracted to them, especially since there are even worse, more retrograde humans gunning for them in the form of small-town Texas Satanists. What follows is pretty good. Though the style is TV movie, director Starrett develops a very high level of paranoia in the blandest of locations, gas stations, country and western bars, trailer parks. He maintains a much higher than average level of anxiety and uncertainty, and appears briefly as a friendly yet menacing gas station attendant at the end. Oates doesn't get to act enough. He's a fine actor, as we see elsewhere this season in Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Peter Fonda acts as well as he is able. He also demonstrates the incorrect way of sharpening a knife. Loretta Swit and Lara Parker as Alice and Kelly do not remain long in the viewer's mind. Watch out for a particularly striking title sequence. It and the outstanding ending are reason enough to watch this film. Next, as part of the tastefully titled Keep Death on the Road, a double bill, a strong message film in favor of seatbelts and cordless telephones, Detour. Detour is an early film noir made in 1945. The director was Edgar G. Ulmer, who was born in Austria in 1900. Originally a production designer who worked in both film and theater for such names as Max Reinhardt and Alexander Korda, Ulmer came to the United States in 1931. He began his career as a director in 1934 on a studio picture, The Black Cat. Thereafter, he made low-budget films for the greater freedom it gave him. Freedom to create such immortal works as The Man from Planet X, Babes in Baghdad, and The Amazing Transparent Man. Detour is the tale of a classically weak film noir hero, Al Roberts, who resides in a small town with his girlfriend Sue. Sue aspires to go to Hollywood and be an actress, even though Al warns her millions of people go out there every year and end up polishing cuspidors. Sue goes anyway and becomes a waitress. Al follows. The misfortune which overtakes Al on the road is so unlikely that I shall not tell it to you here. You have to see it for yourself, how in attempting to put the top up on a convertible, Al Roberts is transformed from neighborhood nice guy into a maniac, wanted for 2 murders and countless felonies. And what murders! One of them is totally insipid. The other is outstandingly bizarre. And neither is Al's fault. Well, not entirely his fault. You'll see. Al, played by Tom Neal, resembles the central character of You Only Live Once, or Hitchcock's The Wrong Man, an innocent caught in the vengeful grip of fate and the justice machine. In Detour, the hero's predicament is enhanced by the presence of a spectacularly bad girl in the form of Vera, the dominatrix blackmailer, played by Anne Savage.
How far did you say you were going?
Los Angeles?
L.A.? L.A.'s good enough for me, mister.
Detour has some rather hokey montages and dream sequences, but it benefits from a good script, constantly obsessed with money. What's $10, asks the hero. A piece of paper crawling with germs. There's certainly too much voiceover narration, and the film ends oddly early, lasting just over an hour. But the hero's in a great mess, and the villainess is marvelous. And there's even a putative role reversal, good man becoming bad, if not vice versa. Note how most of the noir thrillers we're showing this year, Detour, Build My Gallows High, Act of Violence, and The Narrow Margin, all contain sequences of relentless road travel, such as must have been the norm for many Americans drifting west after the Second World War. Detour and Act of Violence feature more or less the same shot, the vehicle carrying the protagonist traveling from right to left through Joshua Tree Park in Southern California. The Joshua Tree often acts as a cut-price saguaro cactus for movies wishing to indicate that we have reached the American Southwest, the Joshua Trees being only 3 hours' drive from production HQ in Los Angeles. That day in Arizona, intones Al Roberts as he sees the Joshua Trees. He obviously failed to bring along his gazetteer of desert plants. Tonight's film, Rope, is a famous thriller by the director of so many famous thrillers, Alfred Hitchcock. In 7 years, this is the first Hitchcock film we've shown on Moviedrome, and there's a reason for that. While Moviedrome, in theory, is a selection of cult and weirdo-type movies, Hitchcock is the epitome of the commercial director. His films were designed to be seen by the largest of mass audiences in the United States, Europe, and all over the world. Of all Hitchcock films, perhaps only Psycho and The Birds, odd, uncharacteristic movies made late in his career, could be described as cult movies. Why then are we showing Rope? Because, in addition to being a celebrated thriller, Rope is also famous as a cinematic experiment, an attempt to give the illusion that the film was made in one continuous shot.
I've always wished for more artistic talent. Well, murder can be an art, too. The power to kill can be just as satisfying as the power to create.
In fact, the fame of Rope is slightly exaggerated. There are at least 2 exchanges of close-ups at crucial moments in the film, and an opening exterior. But the rest of the film is played as if it were one continuous shot, uninterrupted by close-ups, medium shots, or masters. At the time, the average film had anything up to 600 separate cuts in it. Today, with the fast editing popularized by television programs and MTV videos, the cuts can number in the thousands. And there's nothing inherently wrong in that. A film can exist any way the filmmaker wants it to. And some filmmakers, as diverse as Bruce Conner and Nicholas Roeg, have produced fascinating films whose excellence was in the editing. At the same time, editing strategies, especially the modern exchanges of televisual close-ups, can become predictable. The long take, if done well, cannot. Remember the extraordinary opening shot of Touch of Evil. Would that sequence be remembered today if it had been accomplished by 30 shots instead of 1? In Rope, Hitchcock goes one better than any other exponent of the long take, fashioning a film which appears to be one continuous sequence. Obviously, it can't be. A roll of 35mm film is at the maximum 1,000 feet long, approximately 10 minutes. Hence, every 10 minutes, Hitchcock and his cameraman Joseph Valentine were forced to find a solution to the problem of the reel change. And they often joined reels by having a character walk past the camera, momentarily blacking out the frame. If Rope, the story of two dispassionate young killers based on the Leopold and Loeb murder case, resembles theatre, it's not surprising. It's based on a play by the British novelist and playwright Patrick Hamilton. His work has recently been rediscovered. Rope was revived this year in London. The entire film was shot on a soundstage, in a set specially constructed with flying walls and furniture which moved on especially greased rollers. A special dolly was invented by the key grip Maurice Rosen to allow the bulky studio camera greater freedom of movement. As many as 5 microphone boom operators were working simultaneously to record live sound. To complicate matters still further, it was Hitchcock's first color film, and they had great problems creating the right effect of evening light towards the end of the film. When cameraman Valentine left the picture due to illness, Hitchcock reshot the final 5 reels. In spite of its theatrical origins, Rope is far from stagey. Able to act out entire sequences, sometimes 10 minutes in length, the actors are able to deliver performances as opposed to snippets. James Stewart as the suspicious professor, and John Dahl and Farley Granger as the killers are outstanding.
Take it easy, Philip. Rupert's onto something. He isn't. Now let up. Got to have a drink, Brandon. Enough. You're not. Take your hand off my arm. Don't you ever again tell me what to do and what not to do. I don't like it, Brandon, and I'm not going to take your voice down. I hope I didn't upset Philip.
You never let me console myself.
No, he's more likely mixing his drinks. You seem rather upset yourself. Do I?
Special praise is due the model-making section of the art department, who produced a giant perspective model of the New York skyline outside the apartment windows. Including replicas of the Empire State and Chrysler Building, the skyline contained 6,000 flashing lights, 200 miniature neon signs, 26,000 feet of wire, and was operated by 47 different switches. The said model also included cloud formations made from spun glass and chicken wire under the direction of the famous meteorologist, Dr. Dinsmore Alter. Rehearsals for Rope took 10 days. Filming began on January 22nd, 1948, and ended on February 21st, 4 weeks later. Because it was based on an actual event, Rope was a cause of anxiety in certain parts of the United States. It was banned in Chicago, where the crime occurred, and also in Spokane, Memphis, and Seattle. Next in tonight's double feature of cinematic experiments is a little-seen Vietnam movie, making its terrestrial premiere. 84 Charlie Mopek is the name of the unseen cameraman, who is one of the characters in this film, making a continuous record for the U.S. Army Motion Picture Division, hence Mopek, of a platoon on a highly dangerous patrol.
Stone Hombre 3, Stone Hombre 3, this is Outrider 2. We are down and happy. Say again, down and happy. Sit rep, Alpha, Oscar, Kilo, over.
Outrider 2, this is Stone Hombre 3. We read you, Lima, Charlie, down and happy. Sierra Romeo, check, Alpha, Oscar, Kilo, over.
Outrider out.
Stone Hombre out.
It's the first feature of director Patrick Duncan, and it was made for very little money in 1989. While most Vietnam War films seem to get made in the Philippines, this one was shot in Southern California in Super 16mm. What's principally interesting about it is its style. It's all shot as if it were documentary footage of an actual event in progress, unedited newsreel material, in fact. Thus, as long as we remember that the cameraman is a participant in the story, the film functions as a stylistic experiment such as Lady in the Lake, the film noir in which the camera was also the protagonist, the actor, Robert Montgomery, being glimpsed occasionally in mirrors during the course of the film. This was also to have been the style of Orson Welles' first feature, based on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. In fact, Wells was to have appeared at the beginning of his projected but unfilmed production, explaining to the audience that they were the eyes of the protagonist. Given Wells' grandiloquence and lack of experience in the medium, perhaps it's for the best that Heart of Darkness foundered, and that he went on to make a more conventional film, Citizen Kane, instead. The concept of 84 Charlie Mopic is excellent, and it's often quite an interesting film. Its big failure is in the appearance of the actors, who, no matter how desperate their situation, always look as if they've freshly emerged from the bath and coiffure salon. Of course, the same can be said of Platoon or the Rambo movies, but they were at least shot in the tropics, rather than in somebody's back garden in Topanga Canyon, Los Angeles. The style is so good, in fact, that one wishes for a stronger, more exigent director who could have forced these actors to get a little dirty and a little red-eyed. They don't look stressed or desperate in the least, with the partial exception of Richard Brooks in the role of Sergeant O.D.
Dig this, Lieutenant, you ain't in the rear no more. You know what, I have a court-martial, you need more than one officer. The only brass I see is yours. Now, out here, the bush is the boss.
Look, I'm not walking in here off the street. I've had infantry training.
That stateside Mickey Mouse shit don't cut it here, sir. This is Charlie's game, his rules. We learned how to play it. That's why we're here.
Nevertheless, an interesting experiment. The characters are no more incongruously clean than those of Great Expectations or Middlemarch, after all.
There is good and evil. And evil is something that you work at. No, mustn't touch. Your mother may not like you handling knives.
Tonight on Moviedrome, the premiere of a film by the best of the black American directors and one of the better directors of the modern American cinema itself. The film is To Sleep with Anger, and the director is Charles Burnett. It's very possible you haven't heard of this film, and even more likely, unless you're French or a devotee of Cahiers du Cinéma, that you haven't heard much about Burnett, although he was a guest of the London Film Festival several years ago. To Sleep with Anger is Burnett's third feature, made in 1989 and given a limited release in the United States the following year. Like his other films, My Brother's Wedding and Killer of Sheep, it's set in the home of a black family in south-central Los Angeles. It may come as a surprise to UK viewers in its depiction of what life in LA is like. It's certainly not the imaginary LA of Alan Rudolph or Robert Altman, devoid of blacks, devoid of Mexicans, and totally devoid of smog. But it's an equally far cry from the gang-banging, Uzi-fixated madhouse of Colors or Boys in the Hood. What it is, and this is typical of Burnett, is a film about more or less regular people in their normal lives. And what's even more amazing, and this is Burnett's specialty, is that it isn't boring, which for a film about ordinary people is usually a sine qua non. The parents are Mississippi farming people, first-generation immigrants to LA. The children strive to be buppies, black, upwardly mobile urban professionals, and work for loan companies and banks. The grandchildren simply rush around creating havoc. Into this strained but still functional environment comes the bad house guest, Harry, excellently played by Danny Glover, quoting Pushkin and setting a strange influence to work throughout the house.
Boy, that's bad luck to touch a fellow with a broom.
To Sleep with Anger was treated as Burnett's first major feature. Though the budget was still minimal by Hollywood standards, $1.4 million, no less than 7 white producers managed to glom their names onto it, a fact that often provokes amusement as the opening credits roll. The credit sequence is, by the way, sensational, a very clever visual illustration of the film's central combination of gentleness and barely suppressed rage. The excellent color photography is by Walt Lloyd. This is one of the best films that we're going to be showing on Moviedrome this season. As in all of Charles Burnett's films, LA is the inertia capital of the world. Women are enslaved to domesticity and rampant children. Men are always ineffectually trying to fix things that inevitably break worse. Sounds familiar? You see, it's not only about LA. Watch out for some fine acting from Glover, from Richard Brooks, Paul Butler, and Mary Alice, and guest appearances by Vanetta McGee, last seen on Moviedrome in The Big Silence, and Cy Richardson, late of Repo Man, and author of Mario Van Peebles' black western, Posse.
Now on BBC2, the second of tonight's Moviedrome films stars Jack Palance and Brigitte Bardot in Jean-Luc Godard's Le Mépris, introduced by Alex Cox.
Le Mépris, alias Contempt, is Jean-Luc Godard's version of The Odyssey, or to be more precise, his version of an American film producer trying to make a film version of The Odyssey with a French screenwriter at Cinecittà Studios outside Rome. The film, Godard's film that is, was made in 1963, at a time when American studios had begun to come to Italy and Spain to make big costume epics, films like Cleopatra and Lawrence of Arabia. They don't do that anymore, of course, nor do they invest in big-budget British films like The Devils and Oh Lucky Man, the way they did in the early 70s. Instead, a cultural iron curtain has descended between Europe and the United States, courtesy of a little thing called GATT. GATT, as you're no doubt aware, is the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs. It's a so-called free trade agreement, which is supposed to create a level international playing field for manufacturers, producers and salespeople the world over. One of the provisions of said GATT is that the state can't subsidize national industry. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to the military, and the Pentagon is still free to hand out billions of dollars in development subsidies to Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, and Lockheed. But one area GATT was supposed to apply to was the media, and so towards the end of last year, a fierce battle erupted between the Americans, who wanted to end all European government film subsidies, and the French, who didn't. Never mind that the Americans already control 80% of the world's film market, they wanted the lot of it. I never thought I'd be grateful to the French for anything, but I was here, and so were a lot of other people involved in the business of making films. Tonight, a dark, ironic movie on the wretchedness that is world cinema. Jack Palance plays the cutthroat producer, Fritz Lang, the director for hire, Godard appears as Lang's assistant, and Labardot is the obscure object of screenwriter Michel Piccoli's desire. I am convinced, said cinematographer Raoul Coutard, that Godard is trying to explain something to his wife in Le Mépris. It's a sort of letter, one that's costing the producer Beauregard $1 million. Godard is the master exponent of male-female misery, and the miserable scenes between Piccoli and his increasingly alienated wife are excellent. Philip Strick, in the Monthly Film Bulletin, did an elaborate analysis of similarities between Contempt and The Odyssey itself, and also discussed the film's very strategic use of color, blues versus reds, with yellow as the neutral shade. It's a stark but extraordinarily beautiful film. Raoul Coutard's other credits include Alphaville, Breathless, and Jules et Jim. Don't miss the traditionally happy Godardian ending.
The silver screen on the small screen now on BBC2, with Alex Cox as a supporting feature just before a Moviedrome double bill.
Tonight, Moviedrome presents Excalibur, the story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Known during development and pre-production by a variety of titles, including Merlin, Merlin Lives, and Knights, it's held together partially by the character of Merlin the Magician, portrayed by Nicole Williamson in a silver skull cap. The Monthly Film Bulletin was scathing about Williamson, calling his performance abysmal, but I don't really agree. He has a difficult job holding together a vast array of unrelated and sometimes incomprehensible elements, and I think he does it well. Apparently, Excalibur was conceived by director John Boorman as an alternative to his long-planned but never executed version of Lord of the Rings. The Bulletin has an interesting take on this long, rambling project, observing that there is such a thing as too personal a project, An idea turned over for so long that its individuality gets trapped inside it. The consensus filmmaking dreamt of by Hollywood committees. Whoa! Well, it certainly is as unfocused as a lot of Hollywood committee movies, as Borman struggles to incorporate a lot of history and legend and poetic sources into an epic tale with no particular central character. But among the long proceedings, there is much good as well as bad. The cast is great. Helen Mirren is a splendid Morgana, and the Knights are a veritable who's who of future movie stars. Liam Neeson is Sir Gawain, Gabriel Byrne is Uther Pendragon, and Patrick Stewart, Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise, is Léon Degrance. The special optical effects are by veteran effectsman Wally Vivers, and the special photography is by Oxford Scientific Films. The production design by Anthony Pratt is sometimes predictable, but sometimes fascinating, as when the Knights ride into a medieval settlement and discover a hell's mouth, wonderful period detail, in the form of a stage on which depictions of hell and other religious torments were portrayed by actors, the predecessor of theatre and film. My problem with Excalibur is that it's so legendary, it's sometimes hard to care what's going on. Will Sir Bucket find the Holy Grail, or will he fall into the fiery pit? It's only interesting if I know who Sir Bucket is. Is he a minor league knight or a major player? How many chattels does he have? How many vassals? How many serfs toil in his fields? And what sort of toiling do they do? Do they produce anything, or merely grovel in mud, as in Monty Python and the Holy Grail? Now that film was full of serfs, and so the film was grounded, or mudded. In this film you rarely see a commoner. It's all so long ago, enshrouded in the mists of necromancy, that it's a tad difficult to relate to. Of course, the director, screenwriter, producer might reply, it's not reality, it's myth, it's legend. And he'd have a very good point. Although, if it is meant to exist on a mythic, not mundane level, shouldn't it be a bit bigger, a bit more magical? Note The Fine Beginning, for example, with its red sky and horses apparently breathing fire. Well, Kurosawa would have cut to the big night shot with 1,000 men with flaming torches running down the hill. Excalibur is anything but a cheap film, but Borman keeps almost everything in medium shot. The search for the Grail, if this is myth or legend, could take us to the Gobi or Sahara Desert, even to the rainforests of Mexico or Brazil. But no, all these Knoble knights do is ride around the damper parts of Ireland in the mist. Mustn't grumble, though. Whatever the film's virtues and faults, it was a tremendous achievement of the director-producer, getting many $1 million out of Columbia Pictures, Warner Brothers, and Orion to make a film about a British subject with no American actors at all. This was back in the mist-enshrouded days of 1981, of course. Such a mythic quest might not be as attainable today. Nothing Lasts Forever was directed by Tom Schiller in 1934. Schiller was assistant prop man on King Kong. It is he, covered in boot polish, who stands on top of the giant gates on Skull Island shouting, "Kong, Conga, Kong," as the giant ape comes looking for Fay Ray. The same year, 1933, he directed the first of a series of docudramas about the lives of great pianists. Nothing Lasts Forever, the story of the concert pianist Adam Beckett, is the second in his long series of piano-oriented films. Beckett, a vastly popular concert pianist of the teens and 20s, died tragically in 1928 when he was mistaken for John Dillinger at a Chicago rooming house. The young man was leaving the building with a packet of curtain rods wrapped in brown paper when he was accosted by two nervous FBI men who believed they had caught America's most wanted fugitive. What they didn't know was that Beckett, like Beethoven before, was completely deaf. The tragedy that followed forms the climax to Schiller's moving film. Interestingly, there was also a Russian biopic about Beckett, made only 2 years later. Known rather improbably as Last Streetcar to Manhattan, it told the story from a Marxist-Leninist point of view, depicting Beckett as an impoverished proletarian who attempts to organize a young workers' and pianists' communist league. The Russian version, directed by Boris Ternovsky, was later denounced by Stalin at the 25th plenum of the Supreme Soviet. Even as Ternovsky and his fellow filmmakers departed for internal exile, the original American Nothing Lasts Forever began to enjoy a covert popularity behind the Iron Curtain. Both films were removed from the banned list by Nikita Khrushchev in 1959. Alexander Solzhenitsyn reputedly declared that only Schiller would be allowed to direct the feature version of The Gulag Archipelago. Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev apparently discussed Nothing Lasts Forever at length during their first historic summit, Reagan having tried out for the role of Mendelssohn in another of Schiller's biographies of great composers, the role eventually going to Randolph Scott. Now aged almost 90, Schiller lives in New England, where he and Solzhenitsyn still meet regularly, discussing their adaptation of the Gulag. The money is already in place for this big-budget American-Russian-French co-production. The only delay apparently is caused by a disagreement between Schiller and Solzhenitsyn as to how many musical numbers shall appear in the film.
Welcome to BBC2's Sunday Night Moviedrome, a double feature taking in the street life and street language of Buenos Aires, as Alex Cox explains.
Tonight, as the first half of our south of the border, down Buenos Aires way double bill, we proudly present the network premiere of Naked Tango. Set in the 1920s underworld and based on unpublished manuscripts by Manuel Puig, the author of Kiss of the Spider-Woman, Naked Tango is a bodice ripper for the 1990s, the cinematic equivalent of those large chest-heaving novels by the likes of Barbara Cartland and Fabio.
I need to know. Do you want to make me happy?
Yes.
You're one.
Naked Tango is the sad tale of Stephanie, played by the French actress Mathilde May, who on a whim decides to adopt the identity of a young woman whom she sees throwing herself off an ocean liner. Stephanie is the bored young wife of the respectable Judge Torres. That face you've seen 1,000 times before, particularly in Buñuel movies, belongs to the late Spanish character actor Fernando Rey. Adopting the identity of Alma, Stephanie finds herself thrust into the Buenos Aires tango-dancing gangland, where knives flash and everything looks like a commercial for perfume. Variety observed that the film's message is tango equals sex equals death. So it's no surprise to learn that this is the first film directed by Leonard Schrader, brother and screenwriting partner of Paul Schrader, director of Hardcore, Money Equals Sex Equals Death, and Cat People, Large Felines Equals Sex Equals Death. Well, thus it may be. Matilda, a.k.a. Alma, wields a mean carving knife, but ultimately succumbs to the improbable charms of Isai Morales and Vincent D'Onofrio.
I don't need this. I use yours.
There are bustiers, camisoles, tangos, breasts, bondage, a blindfolded orchestra, something I particularly enjoy in any film. All the actors sound dubbed, but there are some great locations and elaborate production design. Naked Tango begins in a very risky way with footage of Valentino. It's always risky to do things like this because the film in question always ends up being compared to the one that's being quoted. In this case, the American boys aren't on a par with Rudolph Valentino. And though our heroine gets her hair cut like Louise Brooks of Pandora's Box, etc., Louise Brooks, she ain't. Speaking of the great sex symbol and her haircut, there was a piece about her this year in the February Sight and Sound. In it, Peter Wallen writes, "The analysis of haircuts has as yet not played a substantial part in film theory or scholarship, although Roland Barthes' celebrated essay on haircuts in Mankiewicz's Julius Caesar provides a fine precedent. See you after Naked Tango for Apartment 0 for further sexual tension on the Pampas. Next, in our Down South America Way double bill, we present the network premiere of Apartment 0, a British-Argentinian co-production made in 1988. Although it came as a surprise to President Ronald Reagan that South America was not one place, but a variety of places, "Hey," he observed after a goodwill tour, "they got all different countries down there." It is to his credit that he recognized this. Argentina, where Naked Tango was also set, is infinitely different from Peru or Bolivia, highly unlike Brazil as well. Far from being a bunch of poncho-wearing, pipe-playing indigenous peoples, the Argentinians pride themselves on being of European extraction. Buenos Aires is reputed to be the most European of Latin American capitals. Its denizens, including, of course, the maestro José Luis Borges, are great Italophiles, and were, until the Falklands War, highly fond of things British, too. One of the oft-heralded benefits of that war was the almost immediate demise of the Argentinian military junta, the last in a long line of repressive military governments. In fact, the demise of the military junta would probably have occurred in any case, since in the mid-1980s it became the fashion for repressive oligarchies to replace their military heads of state with a man in a suit. Hence Pinochet being asked to step aside in Chile, on the understanding that he could remain the head of the army, or civilian President Fujimori of Peru obliging his military masters by staging a coup against himself. Whether the transition from military to civilian government was real or fraudulent, there remained huge hordes of armed men, regular soldiers and servicemen, civilian self-defense patrols, foreign mercenaries, paramilitary death squads, the full panoply of state terror, public and privatized. The plot of Apartment 0 concerns one of the remnants of this vast murder apparatus, a government death squad hitman who, betrayed by his new civilian masters, has become a serial killer, so as to continue plying his trade.
The method of killing is identical to those used by certain elements within the task forces or death squads here from 1977 on. We don't want to make a political issue out of this police matter, but it is a fact that all those people who engaged in torture and murder for the military government are free. They haven't even been tried. From the moment that their right to follow orders was condoned in this country, we allowed a new breed of citizen to function within our system freely. A breed that kills as a way of life.
Apartment 0 begins in that most dangerous of ways, in the projection booth of a cinema, showing Touch of Evil. Behind the projector is a poster for The Eyes of Laura Mars, a movie about a serial killer, get it? And before we can escape, we realize that we're watching a film about a film buff. Worse, a film buff who is the owner of a cinema. Now, I don't know about you, but I thought if the makers of Cinema Paradiso had been victims of a death squad, or at least kidnapped and held in Beirut cellars for a couple of months, I would have felt there was some justice in the world. I mean, I'm all in favor of films, and I'm in favor of personal films, but I'm strongly opposed to films, or about filmmaking, unless the industry and its denizens are treated in the most cynical and satiric way possible. Apartment 0 attempts to adopt the cynical approach, and there's a good resolution to the hero's cultural aspirations at the end. But all in all, it's a lugubrious tale, with an odd mix of actors and accents and a jerky performance by Colin Firth, an actor both rigid and mannered, as the film enthusiast and fake Britisher.
American. Yeah. California? No, Hartford, Connecticut. Isn't that where Paul Newman lives?
Far better than the serial killer stuff is the romantic subplot involving the cinema owner and his dubious American roommate. It's such a warped, calculating, and repressed relationship. One character insists on doing the other character's laundry and is tortured for it, that it's easily the most interesting aspect of the film. And as the Monthly Film Bulletin observed, it seems to develop independently of the rest of the action. Until the Apache is taken or destroyed. These words form the coda of tonight's Peckinpah Western, Major Dundee. The film was shot in Mexico in 1964. It starred Charlton Heston and Richard Harris and was the big-budget opportunity of a former TV director, Sam Peckinpah, who had directed two highly creditable low-budget westerns, Deadly Companions and the classic Guns in the Afternoon. The film is the thrilling story of an obsessive quest by Union Major Dundee, played by Heston, whose determination to capture or kill an Apache marauder forces him to enlist the services of a group of black volunteers and Confederate prisoners of war, the latter group under Captain Benjamin Tyreen, played by Richard Harris. It features almost the entire who's who of Peckinpah character actors, among them Ben Johnson, R.G. Armstrong, Slim Pickens, Dub Taylor, and James Coburn. Warren Oates, whom we shall see in another Peckinpah classic, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, is particularly good in a typically unsympathetic role. So much of Major Dundee is good, in fact, that we really want it to be excellent. The fact that it isn't has more than one cause. A certain longueur in the script, when Dundee should go after the Indians but doesn't. The screenplay was by one Harry Julian Fink, whose name also appears in Dirty Harry as the pseudonym of John Milius. But a bigger problem is that Peckinpah fell out with the studio, Columbia, during the making of the film, with the inevitable result. The execs let him have his way during the shooting. It's expensive to replace a director halfway through, especially if you don't have any real reason to do so, and then took it away from him during the editing. Peckinpah didn't take his punishment like he was supposed to. Instead, he publicly denounced the studio and repudiated the film, saying their unwanted edits took out the thread lines of the story and made it fall apart. Peckinpah was rewarded by being blacklisted, and it was 5 years before he returned to Mexico to shoot The Wild Bunch, his greatest film. Apparently, Columbia removed 20 minutes from Peckinpah's version, cutting it from 154 minutes to 134. At 2¼ hours, still a pretty long film. But when the film came over here, a further 14 minutes were removed, making Major Dundee even more difficult to follow. The same thing happened in the United States with The Wild Bunch. About 20 minutes were removed from the American version, including several crucial flashbacks and an important subplot featuring the villainous Mexican general. We were lucky with The Wild Bunch, though. When it first played in Britain in a 70mm roadshow version, we saw the version Peckinpah intended us to see. I wish we could say we were showing the complete, restored director's version of Major Dundee this evening, but we're not. Certain scenes remain locked in Columbia's coffers, assuming they still exist at all. I know this creates problems. Invariably, somebody has seen a longer version, and when we show a lesser one on Moviedrome, they write in to complain. And sometimes, even the so-called director's cut isn't really that. For example, with the recently restored version of Peckinpah's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, what we're seeing is an edited version made by Peckinpah before he got fired by the studio, rescued by the editors, Roger Spottiswoode and Dennis Dolan, who literally spirited a print out of the cutting room overnight and kept it hidden for almost 20 years. That was called, on its triumphal re-release, the director's cut. But it wasn't really. It was an early director's cut, with the crucial opening and closing scenes intact, but also with many scenes still loosely edited, playing a couple of minutes too long. So, here follows not the complete, unexpurgated Major Dundee, not the director's cut, but simply the longest version we could find. Even an incomplete Major Dundee being better than no Major Dundee at all.
We're at the Hotel Camino Real. If you come up with anything, we'd be glad to see you.
Bring that with you. Well, don't worry. If he's alive, I'll find him. Well, alive isn't our problem. Well, how about dead or alive? How about that?
Dead. Just dead.
I saw tonight's film, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, years ago and hated it. I saw it with a friend, Greg Hertzov, now the artistic director of the Exchange Theatre in Manchester, I believe, and he was much more positive. But for me, Alfredo Garcia seemed corny and a messy betrayal of the talent shown by its director, Sam Peckinpah, in The Wild Bunch and Guns in the Afternoon. 20 years later, I must admit that I was wrong and Greg was right. What he knew instinctively, I only figured out over the course of the years. Alfredo Garcia is an extraordinary film, perhaps Peckinpah's best after The Wild Bunch, and certainly his most personal film, hidden behind a sometimes very dubious B-movie veneer. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is the story of Benny, a worn-out barroom piano player portrayed by Warren Oates. Benny learns there is a large reward available for the head of his best friend, Alfredo. Since Benny knows Alfredo is dead, he volunteers to dig the corpse up and bring the head back in a bag. Since it's a nice day, Benny decides to take his girlfriend, a prostitute who also had a thing going with Alfredo, with him to do the job. As you might expect, much tragedy, betrayal, and violence ensue. For Benny is not only a pathetic, burned-out, alcoholic piano player, he is also the fastest, most accurate gunman in all Mexico, able to kill 20 men with 10 bullets. It doesn't take much imagination to see that Peckinpah was making some sort of statement here, that he wanted to make the most preposterously action-filled film possible, and using his favorite actor, Warren Oates, to say something about himself. By 1974, when Alfredo Garcia was made, Peckinpah's career was looking distinctly rocky. The Wild Bunch had been a huge success, but subsequent films had not. He continued to fight with the studio and to find himself unceremoniously kicked off his pictures once they'd been shot. His health was not good. He lived a life of excess, to put it mildly. Benny, quite likely, is how Peckinpah saw himself. A hired gun, burned out, beaten down, consorting with prostitutes, and ready to play any tune that was asked of him, to undertake whatever messed-up project came along. The fact that he was able to make a film as mad and personal as Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia means this wasn't really so, but no matter. Benny was the way Peckinpah saw himself in 1974, and it was the way he became shortly after, a little pimp and odd-job man for much richer degenerates. For such a cynical, nay, nihilistic film, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia contains a great deal of emotion, even tenderness. It's one of the few Peckinpah movies with a real love story, the only other one being Ballad of Cable Hogue. Here, Oates' lover is played by Isela Vega, a hugely popular Mexican actress. There's also a strong emotional bond between Benny and the severed head of his best friend. The cast is excellent, as always in Peckinpah's westerns, and this is definitely a western, albeit a 20th century Gothic one. Gig Young plays a gay gringo gangster. Emilio Fernandez, the great Mexican actor-director who played Mapache in The Wild Bunch, here portrays El Jefe, the bad landowner who sets all these evil events in train. Like The Wild Bunch, Alfredo Garcia exists in the shadow of John Huston's Treasure of Sierra Madre. Peckinpah shares Huston's great love of Mexico. At one point, a little overdone perhaps, Gig Young claims his name is Fred C. Dobbs. Dobbs was, of course, the Bogart character from Huston's film. But unlike Huston's, Peckinpah's Mexico isn't just folklore. He depicts the ancient hacienda as if it were the House of Usher, the modern world as a vicious, warped version of Las Vegas. He has a keen eye for detail, the kid at the petrol station who wants to wash Benny's windows and to know what's in that bag. "Dead cat," Benny replies. Peckinpah also has a fine ear for dialogue and for the formal, ritualistic speech patterns of rural Mexico. As Tom Milne pointed out in the MFB, it's all a blood-spattered search for money, but when Benny finally gets the bag containing the $1 million, he almost forgets it. picking up the sack with the severed head instead. As in Treasure of Sierra Madre and The Wild Bunch, the money, the gold is all important, the stuff that dreams are made of, worth countless human lives, but ultimately irrelevant, worth nothing at all.
Now on BBC2, Moviedrome presents a film noir masterpiece, Robert Aldridge's adaptation of Mickey Spillane's Kiss Me Deadly, introduced by Alex Cox.
Tonight, we present the ultimate Moviedrome movie, a film that best embodies all the qualities that enable films to ascend to Moviedrome status, Robert Aldrich's Kiss Me Deadly, made in 1955. Kiss Me Deadly has cult status in extremis. The film was highly controversial when it first appeared, both here and in the United States. In this country, several minutes of violence were removed by the censor, rendering certain scenes incomprehensible. The director, Robert Aldrich, was the director of cult masterpieces like The Big Knife and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. We've shown more Aldrich films on Moviedrome than works by any other director. The script, by A.I. Bizerides, was based on a novel by Mickey Spillane, creator of the patriotic sadist private eye, Mike Hammer. Such was his identification with his creation that Spillane actually played the role of Mike Hammer in The Girl Hunters. Kiss Me Deadly is violent, and unlike many films made after it, it still retains the power to shock us, to make us feel uncomfortable.
I really didn't think the vendor would place the round during the latter part. We have the usually careless stop it. Referee Gilman the vendor's eyes, seeking the telltale.
There's more than one horrible murder, and the character of Mike Hammer, chillingly underplayed by Ralph Meeker, is particularly nasty. Cowardly, manipulative, stupid, a bully, always lagging behind, getting in fights, doggedly trudging forward, beating up old men, music lovers, snooty concierges. Mike Hammer is the perfect anti-hero for Aldrich's cynical film noir thriller. Mike really has no idea what he's looking for. He only knows it's worth a lot of money, and he's after it, by gad, no matter what the consequences.
I hear you're a friend of Nicholas Raimondo.
Raimondo?
Yeah, that's right. Raimondo.
I know nothing. Nothing!
It's quite a stack of records you got here.
Oh, yes.
Hey, Caruso's Pagliacci.
Caruso Pagliacci, il maestro.
That's a collector's item.
A collector's item, yeah.
What's at stake here in Mike's big adventure is stolen, fissionable nuclear material, which is about as modern a MacGuffin as one could wish for. In fact, nobody knows what they're looking for. They just want money. Money. Money is what motivates people in this movie. Money and a love of capricious cruelty and revenge. Mike's apartment, naturally, is equipped with all the latest high-tech stuff. He even has a telephone answering machine. And the film certainly proves the old maxim that bad books make better films than good books do. To wit, the existence of at least 6 features based on the pulp fiction of dubious Jim Thompson, as against only 3 based on Dashiell Hammett's literary detective tales. Most of the violence in Kiss Me Deadly, by the way, happens off camera, but it's atrocious nevertheless. And by the end of the film, this viewer actually starts enjoying Mike Hammer's automatic resort to strong-arm tactics, forcing the old gentleman to part with his key and wiping the smile off the face of the desk clerk. Kiss Me Deadly was photographed by Ernest Laszlo. His work is excellent. Watch out for a long take at the boxing gymnasium, and of course, a spectacular finale. Supporting Meeker is a fine cast, including Albert Decker, alias Dr. Cyclops, Cloris Leachman, of Last Picture Show fame, and Jack Elam, the guy whose eyes go like that. veteran of multiple westerns. And at the outset, note the direction that the credits go in. You may not have noticed, or probably you have, that film or TV credits always roll in one direction, from bottom to top. Well, here they run in the opposite direction. There are those who say the plot of Kiss Me Deadly has been lifted for various films, among them Repo Man.